Hello, welcome to the Personal Statement Workshop, part of the St John's College webinar series. In today's session, we're going to be covering personal statements in more detail, how to structure them, what to include, and how to redraft your personal statement as well. So first of all, what is it? What is a personal statement? And the reason I've got the UCAS logo at the bottom there is because this is a personal statement is part of your UCAS application. So the UCAS website has a lot of information about personal statements. So definitely check the website out for that advice. So a personal statement is 4,000 characters, including blank spaces, or 47 lines, including blank lines. So it works out at about 500, 600 words. So when you first start, it can seem like quite a high number of words, but then when you get going and when you start to do the supercurricular exploration and forming research paragraphs, as we'll discuss later in today's session, I think what you'll find is that is a word limit, emphasis on the limit, and you'll have to be cutting stuff out. So your personal statement essentially is going to be responding to a few questions. So the first of those questions is, why have you chosen this subject or this course? What is it about that particular subject, that particular course that interests you most of all? And finally, what are the skills, the experiences that you've gained that complement studying that course or that subject? So we'll elaborate on these questions in the next few slides. Why do we want you to write a personal statement? As speaking as someone from a university admissions team, why do we want you to write a personal statement? Well, we use them to understand you as an individual applicant. So your interests, your knowledge about the subject, and your motivations as well. We want to confirm your commitment to your chosen subject or course. So you know that you really do want to study this subject for 3, maybe 4 years, depending on the course. For subjects like medicine, it's 6 years. So that commitment is really crucial. We also use your personal statement to find out what you've done in terms of supercurricular exploration. So how have you explored your subject in more detail? In previous webinar sessions, we have gone into detail about supercurricular activities and subject enrichment. We will touch back on that again. It's my favorite topic. So yeah, more on that later. Supporting other elements of your university application. So the personal statement is not this standalone document, although it was a while ago now, I can remember writing my personal statement and feeling, very much like it was in a vacuum and it was the only thing that anyone was going to read about me, and it was super, super, super important, and there was nothing else that I needed to focus on. I think that's really misguided. So speaking from personal experience, I would say remember how the personal statement fits into your whole university application. For universities like Cambridge and Oxford, this can also include things like interviews and also admissions assessments. So just remember that the personal statement is not the only thing that you will be submitting. It's part of your application as a whole. And finally, we use personal statements to potentially, if we interview you, use them as a starting point for discussions in interview. I've mentioned interviews in previous sessions, but let me just briefly say, interviews, as in Oxbridge interviews for undergraduate students, they are essentially conversations. They're academic dialogues with an expert or two in the subject, and then you as a prospective student in that subject. So your personal statement may be used as a springboard to launch that discussion. So that's important to remember as well. Right, okay, so this is just a guide in terms of how you can structure your personal statement and what you can put in it. So we would advise that around 80% of your personal statement is academic in its focus. So that means your interest in the subject. So the other 20% would be talking about wider skills and experiences, and then would have also some sort of summing up, concluding statement as well. So that 80-20 split is roughly what we would advise. I don't want you to sort of be very strict about that, in the sense of making 80%. I don't know my percentages well enough to work out 80% of 47, but yeah, it's not like, it's just a guide is what I'm trying to say. It's not like a hard and fast character line ratio. So one structure following that 80-20 split could be your introduction first of all, then your interest in your subject, and then wider skills and a concluding statement. So those 4 sections that I've listed there for you are what we're going to be covering on the following slides. So first of all, your introduction, we'd probably recommend this being maximum about 1,000 characters, including spaces. So you would set out which subject, which course you are interested in studying, be specific, and why you have chosen it. Again, be specific. So avoid general statements here, and this goes throughout your personal statement. Also, what do you think that you will get from studying that subject at university? What will you gain from it? What do you think it will be like? That can just be an introduction. So you're sort of talking about your angle into the subject, why it interests you and why you want to study it at university. And then explaining that statement, that introductory statement, that's the next 2,200 to 2,400 characters approximately, including blank spaces. So this interest in your subject section, this is made up of what we sometimes call research paragraphs. So these are providing the evidence of your subject interest and the exploration that you've done around those areas of interest. So it's the supercurricular stuff of the personal statement. These research paragraphs, so we're looking at maybe 2 to 3. Again, I'm wary to give sort of hard and fast specifics here, just because, you know, it's your personal statement. I'm not going to say that we're looking for a set number of paragraphs, but what you should be aiming for with these paragraphs, and in a few slides time we'll look at an example of one, they should be analytical, right? They should be demonstrating your critical thinking, your thinking like a uni student approach to your subject, whatever the resource, whether it's an article, a competition you're involved in, a recorded lecture you've seen, a documentary you've watched, whatever it may be critical and analytical about it. We're not just looking for you to summarize it and then move on. We're looking for you to pull out exactly what your opinions and what your questions are, having read or watched it. They also should be relevant and focused. So they should be supported with examples. I guess those two are sort of very similar, those 2 bullet points there. So we need you to be saying exactly what it is that you watched or read or listened to, and they should stay on topic. So again, going back to the word limit issue that I was talking about earlier, the more focused, the more specific you can be, the better, because you are working within that 47 line or 4,000 character limit. We have had a question: how specific should the topic of the research paragraph be? How much detail should we be going into? That's completely up to you. So you could, maybe your first research paragraph could be quite kind of broad. It might be about, I don't know, post-colonial literature written in Germany in the, I don't know, 21st century. I don't know, that was completely pulled from the depths of my brain there. And then maybe in the subsequent paragraphs, you're going into maybe specific authors or specific themes. So that is really up to you. You can do it in sort of any way you can approach the topic, so long as it's specific and you are reflecting on it. The topic can sort of be as broad or as narrow as you wish. It's really, we're looking for what you got from it. I've had some more questions. Yeah, a specific video like from the YouTuber 3 Blue 1 Brown, absolutely, that's one of my favorite ones to recommend for any interested maths students. Honestly, whether you're focusing on one topic or in 2, it depends on the research paragraph. It really does depend. There are some topics that might be related. For instance, we could talk about the climate crisis and migration, forced migration. You could talk about both of those in one research paragraph, because there might be a resource, a documentary, an article, something like that, that talked about both and how they're connected. But you could equally talk about the climate crisis in one paragraph and go into detail about that because it's talking about something specific to that, and then talk about forced migration in another paragraph, if that makes sense. So it really is, I don't want to be prescriptive here. It's not a sense of you have to tick off X number of topics. It's more just getting across what interests you. Some more questions. I'll just pause for a couple more minutes to answer these because I think they're specifically about sort of structuring these research paragraphs. If you're doing an application for, so you're writing a personal statement, sorry, for joint honours, so something like history with politics, yes, definitely try to cover both elements, both subjects there. But again, it doesn't need to be this hard 50-50 split that you've suggested there. And I think what you'll find is with the topics that you find interesting, you might find that all of them have this political and historical angle. I mean, there's a reason that these two subjects are being offered to you as a joint course, right? So they're very related to each other. So don't worry about being very sort of 50 history, 50 politics. The way that those subjects are studied and the way that they work, I guess, in the world, they're very interlinked. That interdisciplinary angle should be something that you are focusing on, I would say, in your personal statement. Yeah, you can absolutely have a mix of themes and specific areas, you know, gender, class, absolutely, yes. In terms of specific subjects, recommendations for that, I would refer you to the subject-specific suggestions in the Supercurricular suggestions document, which is something that's a PDF that's been made by Cambridge. It's got lots of suggestions, all different media for all of our specific courses. It's just listed alphabetically. Yes, a recording of this this session will be distributed and it'll be on the YouTube channel as well. I'm just going to check if there are any other questions that I can answer now. Absolutely, should always be led by something that you're specifically interested in, regardless of the subject. Even those suggestions in that suggestions document that I've just mentioned, don't see them as a prescriptive reading list. We're not looking for all of our applicants to have explored all of the things that we've listed as suggested starting points. That's not what they're meant to do at all. They're literally just some interesting resources to get you going, thinking about your subject in greater detail. Obviously look at what you will be covering in the course, obviously look at exactly how the subject is taught and think about things that you might want to be taking in terms of options and papers and modules. But that suggestions document is exactly that, just suggestions, just starting points. I've got a question that I think will be answered in a later slide about linking supercurricular activities, specifically in the research paragraphs. Yes, please do be specific in where you got your resource from, so you can name the article, the author of the book, the name of the documentary. Definitely do be specific. I think I've covered most of the questions. Okay, yes, and the other ones will be covered in later slides. Okay, I had a bit of a Q&A dive there, but I'm back up to the surface now for the next slide. So wider skills and conclusions. This is the last part of your personal statement. This is the 20% following that sort of subject-specific 80% that we've just gone through. So approximately 800 characters here, but again, I don't want to be prescriptive. It's just to give you a sense. If you you're on a Word document or something and you can highlight and it can give you a word count and a character count, just useful for you to familiarize yourself with that so you understand what 800 characters looks like. So this should include things that you've done, so opportunities, experiences related to your subject or in the context of what you would be studying in terms of your course, your subject at university, and what you've got from them in terms of transferable skills or anything that you have gained in that sense. In terms of your concluding statement, you can, but this again is not prescriptive, you can conclude with a brief sentence that sort of looks forward. Maybe you want to mention something specific about your interest that you would like to pursue in a dissertation, perhaps. So you think that, you know, your EPQ or your research project that you've done or the essay competition you've submitted an entry for, you know, you'd really like to sort of explore another question that's related to that, but that you realize over the course of doing that project, that EPQ or whatever it may be, that actually there's something more there and you're looking forward to researching it in more depth. It could be something like that. Again, not prescriptive, just an example of the sort of summing up that that you could do at the end of your personal statement. So good old-fashioned do's and don'ts now. Bear with me while I work my way through these do's. So do ensure that what you're writing in your personal statement allows us to understand why you're motivated and interested in the subject. The crucial word is you there. So what your motivations are, what your interests are. Again, as I was saying before with the subject, the Supercurricular suggestions document, there we go. It's their suggestions, so they're not sort of something, they're not a tick box list of things, they're just suggested starting points. Make sure that you check the grammar and the spelling, so you can use things like Grammarly and Word to help you with that, and also just reading it through with a fresh pair of eyes for the following day is really useful. So make sure that you have double checked your spelling and grammar. Ensure that what you're saying is backed by examples. So make sure that you are giving this evidence of this wider engagement with your subject. So that's basically including the specific examples of resources and activities that have made you interested in XYZ topic or subject area. Make sure that you are including your own opinions. So you should make sure that those research paragraphs are reflective and analytical. So what did you gain from it? What questions? Where did it lead next? Where did you go next? Maybe that is an example of how you could be reflective. Make sure that it's unique to you in the sense that the things that you mention are genuinely things that you are interested in. The reason I say this is that if you are interviewed, you might be asked about something in your personal statement that you've mentioned really appeals to you because you find XYZ interesting. So make sure that that is what you find interesting. So linking on to that, be honest, be genuine in your interests that you're talking about in your personal statement. Don't just talk about I don't know, great expectations just because you think it's like an impressive text to talk about. If you're genuinely interested in Dickens, great, but if you're not, don't just put it in just because you think it looks good, basically. So make sure it is unique to you, but be honest, and be positive. I've got at the end there. So there may well be things about your subject, your wider subject area, that you don't find very interesting. And that also may change, by the way. I'm just thinking about something that I was writing in my personal statement, and I avoided talking about coins because at the time, sorry, I did classics, so I did the study of the ancient Mediterranean. So I avoided talking about numismatics, which is the study of coins and the imagery in coins, when I was writing my personal statement. When I actually got to uni and studied the subject for many, many years, I really enjoyed thinking about coins. So yeah, you never know. It's something that you don't enjoy now, the way that it's taught at university, the way that you delve into that subject, you might actually end up finding it interesting. Anyway, all that is to say is that when you're talking about your subject interests in your personal statement, just talk about the things that you are interested in. We don't want to know that you're not interested in a certain area of the topic. Focus within that word limit on the things that you do find interesting. So some don'ts now. Don't use cliches or quotations or fancy high flown language, which you wouldn't use in everyday life. So that personal statement that you've written, it should sound like you. It's important, I think, to mention that by fancy language, I'm not meaning specific academic terms, technical jargon within your subject, within your discipline. So let me try and think of one. Oh, I guess I just said one, numismatics, right? So that's just the study of coins. And if I were to talk about, let's say I'm writing my personal statement and I were to talk about numismatics, the more I'm saying numismatics, I don't even know if I'm correcting in saying that word anymore, but let's just say that I am for the sake of an argument here. What I wouldn't be doing is providing a dictionary definition for that, because the people that are reading your personal statement will know what that jargon, what that term means. So don't avoid using something that is required by the language of your subject area, in terms of what academics use, but make sure that you understand it, and also make sure that you're not taking up the word count by just giving that sort of, the dictionary defines da da da. So yeah, that's an important point. I can see that there are more questions coming in. I will leave them until the end of the slides, just to ensure that I get through all of the content. So what you shouldn't do as well, so don't make jokes. Your personal statement is a professional piece of work. It's going to be read by admissions staff, academics, so definitely treat it as such, treat it as a professional piece of work. It's not the place to launch your comedic career. Don't reference a specific course or university, in the sense that your application, your personal statement, is going to be read by all of your university choices. So through UCAS, that's up to 5. The exception to that don't rule is when you're referring to maybe Oxford's unique summer school, their UNIQ summer school, or the Cambridge Sutton Trust summer school, or the St John's College poster competition, or anything like that. So when there is in the name of a competition or a residential or any sort of program that you've been part of, or maybe you came back in February to the Adams Society maths lecture that we put on at St John's to celebrate the centenary of that college maths society, you can absolutely mention that. You can say the St John's Adams Society lecture by Chris Budd, blah, 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 whatever you got from it. You can definitely mention the name in that sense, but apart from that, you should avoid referring to a specific university or a specific course. Don't repeat yourself. Seems obvious, but I tend to do it a lot. Don't generalize and don't waffle. Also, I'm a waffler. You really don't have space in your personal statement to sort of have this filler. Oh, I've got dictionary definition twice. There we go. I've repeated myself. This slide is ironically an example of what not to do in your personal statement. Anyway, don't start every sentence with I. So make sure you're varying how you begin your sentences. What I would say about this last point, when you're first drafting your personal statement, so you're just trying to get, sort of your ideas out into full sentences, out onto the paper, it's okay if you find yourself using a sentence structure like I, such, such, again and again. In the redrafting process, just make sure that you're not doing all of these don'ts, basically. So don't worry if you're looking at your first draft and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have done all of the don'ts. Don't worry, because that's what the redrafting is for. So overused opening lines. I think something has just popped up in the Q&A or the chat box that specifically relates to this. So this is a really nice segue. I think this is from 2015. UCAS released some, basically a report on overused opening lines in personal statements. So these have been really overused by candidates, basically. So some examples: I've always been interested in blah, 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 or throughout my life, I've always enjoyed studying blah, blah, blah. Don't worry if you have used at some point, maybe at the start in your first personal statement draft, one of these sentences. What I think they can be useful for, so they're overused, but they can be useful in the drafting writing process, is that they can be really nice writing prompts. I don't know if any of you have any sort of daily journal writing prompt things. I have done that in the past, gratitude journaling, things like that. They often include like prompts to get you started, to get you thinking, to get you reflecting. So you might find that these overused opening lines are useful in that sense. But when you're putting together your final draft of your personal statement, just make sure that you've not used them, basically. So yeah, just a point there. What can you do then that can form the content of your personal statement? So what resources and activities, so what supercurricular resources are there, and how can you put them into your personal statement? So first of all, I've got the list. This is from the Supercurricular webinar from a previous session. So the thing to really stress there is that it's more than just books. This subject enrichment can be things that you find online, it can be things that you find in museums, it can be things that you do as well, ways to consolidate your research like competitions. Lots of it is free to access so long as you've got an internet connection. So things like podcasts, blogs, news websites, journals and magazines, documentaries, courses and video essays, long form video essays on YouTube, recorded lectures that can also be on YouTube, but also university faculty websites as well. museum exhibitions and competitions, and I've already mentioned it, the Supercurricular suggestions document. So things like this, which is a resource hub, are really helpful to get you going and to sort of be a place where you can find lots of resources as well. And again, I've got some examples. This is lifted from a previous session's slide as well. So we've got some journals on there, some documentaries, podcasts, and other websites like Enrich, Underground Mathematics, and I Want to Study Engineering, which are good places to look for sort of practice problem solving in the mathematical sciences. A lot of these are mentioned in the Supercurricular suggestions document. So how do you create this bank of potential personal statement content? So i.e., how do you approach critically analysing and independently studying these resources and activities and all of this stuff? So this again is from a previous session, but it's really important to go over it in the context of personal statements in today's webinar. So first of all, you're finding the resources, that's step one. Then once you've found them, you need to evaluate them, make sure you understand what the resource is, why it was made, what sort of resource is it. Maybe there are interesting questions that spring off from that. I always like to think, what makes it to you know, like a public news page, because there are loads of scientific papers that are published all the time, but I think it's interesting when we find, you know, a really catchy headline from a particular study that has just been published. So maybe the fact that it's found its way to the BBC News front page is in itself really interesting. So definitely be critical about evaluating the type of source that it is and think about why it's been produced. I think that can be in itself very interesting to think about. Step three, can you summarize in your own words the main points in the article, in the resource, whatever it may be, and what have you learned from it? Crucially, what are your opinions, having read or watched it, and what questions did it throw up for you? Then if you can go away and fill in any knowledge gaps, so were there any terms, specific jargon words, concepts that the resource discussed that you haven't really come across before? Can you also go away and find alternative viewpoints or approaches? And are there any connections between what you've just come across in this resource, whether it's an article, etc., and something else that you've come across before? So the final two, discussing and then continuing on by following where the thread leads, maybe looking at the end of the chapter or the article for some recommended reading, or looking to see what else the author or the creator of this resource has made. That sort of links back to step one again. So it should be sort of like a cycle where you're just following your own curiosity here, and you're ensuring that your enthusiasm is informed enthusiasm. So the two key takeaway points are, what do you think? So it's about your questions, your opinions, and also as you're going through finding the resources, summarizing them, reflecting on them, make sure you're keeping a record of that. So a supercurricular log in some sense, whether it's just notes on a notes app on your phone, whether it's a Google Doc, anything like that, or a physical book that you're writing in, keep a record, because then when you're coming to redraft your personal statement, it's really helpful for you to know what the article name exactly was, or indeed to be able to save the URL for the resource that you found. So what you're doing by following these steps is you're demonstrating independent thinking and critical research as well. So writing about your supercurricular journey. So this is an example template of something that you can form into a research paragraph. So how would you put together a research paragraph? This is just an example, and it's an example that works off this journey idea. So the process of your exploration of the subject. There are other ways to write a research paragraph in your personal statement. This is just one of the ways. So let's read through this example, this template then. So a particular supercurricular activity or resource made me think a lot about the impact of, maybe it's a wider issue that the resource covered, maybe it's a specific event related to the topic that resource covered, on particular subject. So it's very flexible there in terms of the wording. It's just an example. So it made me think a lot about the impact of something on something else. This sparked my interest in, and then maybe it's, you know, specific topic, and I explored further by researching a related topic in another resource. And I think that, and then you would discuss either that particular resource or those resources generally. Maybe they are arguing for the same, they have the same argument, or maybe they're from two different points of view, or maybe they're taking two different approaches to the same topic. You know, whatever it may be, you're discussing them critically, you're giving your own opinions, and you're thinking about the questions that you have. So you're demonstrating that academic curiosity that we're looking for. And then perhaps your next paragraph would be reflecting on a resource on a similar topic, or it could be a resource on another topic from a different perspective or a different context, or perhaps it's the same perspective but a different topic. You know, you can really be flexible here. It's just an example, this template. It's just to get you thinking about how you can kind of piece together your supercurricular exploration. So on the next slide, okay, now we're on to the bit where we've got an example personal statement paragraph that I've got for you, and we're going to redraft it. So we're going to take it sentence by sentence, line by line, and we're going to think, okay, what could we improve here? How could we redraft this? I understand that this is specific to like humanities and also specific to history. I apologize for that. I will try and discuss afterwards some ways that you can do this for the sciences as well. As we go along, I think it will become obvious that this is very applicable, what we're working through here, this idea of redrafting and the structure that you can use for these research paragraphs. So this is what I've got. I'll just read it as it is, and then we'll be taking it section by section. So from an early age, I have been interested in the study of history. I find studying the lives of people in the past fascinating and important. As Churchill said, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. I have recently become particularly fascinated by the way that history is affected by people's perceptions and biases. So, taking the first bit then. From an early age, I have been interested in the study of history. You could use the chat box now to tell me what you think some improvements could be for this sentence. How would you redraft this? Yeah, absolutely. The opening is really common. It's that cliche opening, from an early age, ... Absolutely. So we're just looking at the first bolded bit for now, just that first section. Yeah, absolutely. So you're already given examples as well in the chat of how you would make it specific to a particular topic, a particular resource, a particular activity. Absolutely. So that's how I've also suggested redrafting it here. So yeah, you're right. Cliched, vague. It's one of the most common opening lines. It also is very empty. It doesn't really tell us much. There's no real content there to it. So I would say delete it, or as you have all suggested, reword it to be specific. So how did something spark your interest in something else? So exactly as I've said here, visiting X museums, ABC exhibition sparked my interest in a specific topic. This developed to form the basis of, you could maybe go on and just launch right into talking about your EQ, your essay that you did, some independent research project that you did. It doesn't have to be an EPQ, it can be anything that you've sort of explored further. So that's how you could reword it. But yeah, I'd say getting rid of those cliched and vague openings is a good way to go. Got some really great suggestions in the chat. Thank you. Making it specific to a resource, recalling specific events. History is absolutely, as you say, too generalized. History, what do you mean by history? It's so broad that it doesn't really tell us much at all. So making it specific to a particular era, maybe a particular way of studying history, something like that. So this next part then, so just up until the bit where it says important, I find studying the lives of people in the past fascinating and important. What do you think we would do with this sentence if we're redrafting this part? Would you change the wording? Would you get rid of it? What would you do? Yeah, really good point. I've just seen coming in. Fascinated and fascinating. We have a repetition there. So yeah, thinking about varying your language, that will be definitely something you're thinking about in the final drafting of your personal statement. Yeah, very good spot. Yeah, too generalized again. Which people, exactly, the lives of which people. It's really interesting springboard into something, you know, not denying that that it is fascinating and important, but it doesn't tell us much. Also, someone said changing the wording so you're not starting with I. Absolutely, if you're finding that this paragraph within your whole personal statement, there are a lot of I sentences, then absolutely in the redrafting process, start to vary that sentence structure. Yeah, explaining why, being specific, basically, absolutely. So what I've said for this one is it's an opinion and it's already implicit for both you and the reader, because it's kind of the study of history. Like everyone who's studying history believes this, so it's kind of a moot point, if you will. It doesn't demonstrate anything specific, so exactly as you've all said, make it specific. So I've said here delete it, but you could absolutely reword it into something including an example, including something specific. So the next part then. So as Churchill said, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. How would you redraft this sentence? Yeah, absolutely. Alarm bells, quotation here. Does anyone know anything interesting about this quotation, by the way? This specific quotation? Yes, I'll absolutely go back a slide. Oh, sorry. Oh, there we go. I'll just go back a slide. So we're looking at the quotation now, and I'll just go back to the following slide in a second. Yeah, it's using valuable space, it's using valuable words. Yeah, absolutely. The quote is cliched, it doesn't offer any insight. Yes, so I'm going to move back to this slide because it talks about the quotation. So yes, cliched is a quote, so definitely avoid if you're just using it for the sake of using the quote and you're not actually analyzing the quotation, then remove it. This one is interesting in the sense that Churchill was actually paraphrasing, so it shouldn't really be attributed to him. And the original quote, if you will, is those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So yeah, it's interesting to think about this quotation. I think they're useful for you to think about why we might misattribute a quotation, why that quotation has become so popular, you know. So thinking about it in a sort of meta way about the quote is quite useful. You might actually find that a whole new research paragraph that you could put into your personal statement would be about this quote, right? It could actually be the quotation here that is making you think about your topic in more depth. So it could be something that you could use as a supercurricular springboard, if you will. So you could think about misattribution of oft quoted phrases or other sayings to different figures in political in politics or history, sorry. You could also include other examples and reflect on what scholars, what academics have suggested about this. But yeah, you could also just remove it. If you're not interested in thinking about that, that quotation and it doesn't sort of strike a chord with you and it doesn't interest you to delve further, then I would say just delete it. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Someone has said it's your personal statement, not Churchill's. Absolutely. Excellent. Yes, I also agree that the original quotation sounds a lot better. So this is a series of books. This is volume 1, I think, of about 5 or 6 volumes, and this one is called Reason in Common Sense. So definitely go away and read more about that if you're interested in that original quotation. Okay, moving on. So we've got the next and the final part of this example research paragraph. So I have recently become particularly fascinated by the way that history is affected by people's perceptions and biases. Can anyone spot a major? Yes, absolutely. So affected is incorrectly spelt there. That is the wrong verb. Yes, so yes, waffle, it's quite a repetition of words. It's not really saying much. Again, be specific. Yeah, I hope what you're taking from this, as well as the importance of checking the spelling and the grammar of your personal statement, is that it's really important to be specific rather than general. This sentence, again, is a great example of something that you would probably write in your first personal statement, or you'd probably just think about if you're considering why you're interested in studying this subject, if it's history or whatever subject it may be. But what you then go on to think or reflect on or talk about, the specifics that's personal to you, that's what we're interested in. So absolutely, you can reword it. Interest in the impact of bias led me to watch this documentary, or led me to read the work of whatever it may be. So yeah, you just can cut down the words, and you can also be more impactful in terms of using an example. Okay, so thank you very much for your engagement there in the chat. That was excellent. Right, so on this slide, what are we looking for then in a Cambridge personal statement? And I've got a little asterisk there because there isn't really such a thing as a Cambridge personal statement. There is the option to do that additional optional personal statement, the little box that comes up in the My Cambridge application, which is that supplementary form that we require all candidates to fill in. I will be sending you the webpage about My Cam app, My Cambridge application, in the follow-up email. You can also just find it online by searching My Cambridge application questionnaire. That'll bring up the webpage as well. So that is, I guess you could call it a Cambridge specific personal statement, because that's the opportunity for you, if you wish to do so, to talk about something particular to the Cambridge course, the Cambridge way of learning this subject, teaching this subject, something that you don't want to put in your main UCAS personal statement because it's specific to a particular university course, right? But apart from that, let's just move on from that sort of slight footnote there and look to the bullet points then. So subject and academic focus. So you can explain in your personal statement how particular academic areas within your subject, how it appeals to you. The next one, you have demonstrated informed enthusiasm. You have shown curiosity. Have you taken the time, taken the initiative to explore topics further in your own time and going beyond the curriculum as well? Have you included specific examples? So this has been something that I've been saying again and again and again, but it's really important. You need to reference the resources, the activities that you've used or done, whatever it may be. You've got to be specific and you've got to give examples. Have you reflected and made connections? Have you sort of thought like an academic in that sense? What have you found challenging about the resource? What have you found interesting and why? What did you gain from it? Where did it lead you? Could you push back against the arguments or the ideas in the resource? And finally, have you demonstrated a sort of a research approach, this research-minded approach? How did you then go on to find the answers to the questions that this resource or activity threw up for you? Where did you go from there? Have you demonstrated the sorts of things that you need to do when you're a researcher, basically, when you're an academic, when you're a university student? Okay, some final tips then. I'm just conscious of time, so I'll be wrapping up with the slides in just a moment, and then I'll take any additional questions that anyone has. So final tips then. Remember to be honest about what you're genuinely interested in, rather than including the things that you think we're looking for. So I've already said this. I think that that Supercurricular suggestions document, it's exactly that. It's a document of suggestions. So make sure that you are putting stuff in your personal statement that you are absolutely genuinely interested in yourself. The word count is important. As we've said, it can seem daunting and quite overwhelming when you're in the first draft, early stages of writing your personal statement, but it's really important that as you're redrafting, you are keeping an eye on that word count, that character count, the line count, cutting out things that are irrelevant, cliche, too general, all of the things that we've gone over in that example personal statement paragraph that I just showed you before. Make sure that the things you've said in your personal statement are not sort of everything that you have to say about that topic. What I mean by that is, after you've written your personal statement, which is a really sort of huge milestone and achievement, make sure that you don't stop doing the things that led to that personal statement coming about. What I mean by that is continue on with your subject exploration, your supercurricular activities, because if you're interviewed, they may ask you, okay, what else have you read about this particular topic? Or have you read anything else by this author or anything like that? What have you read recently that has maybe made you rethink what you've originally put, what you've originally argued, your original opinion from your personal statement? So make sure that you can challenge your personal statement self, if that makes sense. Make sure you're continuing on with this supercurricular engagement. Keep exploring your subject and start drafting now. So that's a really crucial one. I hope you excuse my very cliched quote here, but the best first draft is the one that is done. So it doesn't matter if it's good. A first draft doesn't have to be good. It's a first draft. Something I keep having to tell myself as well. The best first draft is one that is done. So just start drafting now. And finally, remember, as I said at the beginning, your personal statement is one part of your university application. So it may be the thing that you're focused on right now, but do remember that for your course, your subject, you may have an admissions assessment. You also need to be thinking about your exams and your revision, and in order to get the grades that you need to meet your offer. So the personal statement is not the only thing. At times, I think particularly in this sort of summer period that you're in now, speaking from personal experience again, it was sort of the thing that I thought about all the time, and that's not the best way to approach it. Your personal statement is important. It's one part of your application. So make sure that you're putting it in context. Engage with the supercurriculars and don't just go through them and list them. So make sure that you're being selective and prioritizing what you're discussing, what you're including in the personal statement. So make sure you're going for quality rather than quantity, and go for depth rather than breadth. Okay, that brings me to the end of the slide. So I'm going to stop the recording here, and then I will take questions that you have. If you're watching this on YouTube, then you can email me at accessofficer@joh.cam.ac.uk if you have any further questions. Thanks, everyone.